Well, welcome everybody to the Medical Device Cybersecurity Distinguished Speaker Series as part of UC-San-Francisco-Stanford CERC and FDA. I'm Professor Kevin Fu from Northeastern University and the Archimedes Center for Healthcare and Medical Device Cybersecurity, and I'll be your host and moderator today. First, a disclaimer. This seminar series does not represent official FDA policy or guidance. The contents are those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the official views of, nor an endorsement by FDA, HHS, or the US government. This seminar is being recorded. Again, I am your moderator for today. I am a professor at Northeastern University in Electrical and Computer Engineering and the Curry College of Computer Sciences in Boston. I'm also the director of the Archimedes Center for Healthcare and Medical Device Cybersecurity. And if you'd like to connect, you can find me on most of the media, like on LinkedIn. A couple of announcements before we get started into today's seminar. The FDA is hiring. If you're interested in a career in OT cybersecurity, on medical device cybersecurity, you can contact the FDA for open positions on many of the websites with the positions listed, or just contact diane.mitchell@fda.hhs.gov for those listings. So just a reminder of why we're here today. This is something we do every month, every third Thursday, and there's been a big push for medical device makers to protect their medical devices from cybersecurity threats. There's been quite a lot of activity in public policy. For instance, just late last year in December, the US Congress passed the Omnibus Bill, which included language creating new federal statute for medical device cybersecurity, which has now evolved into finalized FDA guidance that took effect at the end of March on new requirements for protecting medical device cybersecurity, both pre-market and post-market. There's also draft guidance from the FDA on cybersecurity and medical devices, QSR, Quality System Regulations. This is still draft guidance, not yet for implementation, but the public comment period did end last July. When this guidance is finalized, then it will be for implementation. And so this is one of the reasons we are here today. Now, today we are honored to have as our guest, Greg Garcia. He is the Executive Director for Cybersecurity at the Healthcare Sector Coordinating Council, also known as the HSCC. The HSCC convenes organizations for critical healthcare infrastructure, working in partnership with HHS and other government agencies to protect the security and resilience of the sector, patient safety, and public health. Greg has a very interesting history. Actually, I had the pleasure of getting to know Greg. I think it was maybe 10 or 15 years ago, serving together on a NIST Federal Advisory Committee on Security and Privacy. But Greg was the nation's first DHS Acting Secretary for Cybersecurity and Communications under President George Bush, where, among other achievements, he initiated the creation of the National Cyber and Communications Integration Center, or NCIC. He also served as Executive Director of the Financial Services Sector Coordinating Council and stood up the IT Sector Coordinating Council and held executive positions within Bank of America, 3Com Corporation, remember Ethernet, and Information Technology Association of America. By the way, Greg, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but 3Com co-founder Bob is receiving the Turing Award this year.
Oh, great.
Bob Metcalf for the invention of Ethernet, Metcalf's Law. Greg also served as a professional staff on the Committee of Science in the U.S. House of Representatives, where he helped draft and shepherd enactment of the Cybersecurity Research and Development Act of 2002. So today, it's my pleasure to have this fireside chat on public and private collaboration and healthcare cybersecurity preparedness. Greg Garcia is going to give us an overview of, first of all, for those of you not familiar with the HSCC, a little bit about that, and then we'll go into our discussion. So Greg, let me hand over the podium to you, and thank you so much for taking time out of your day with your hundreds of members to join us.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Thanks for the introduction, and that's good to hear about Bob Metcalf. I could communicate with him over the years. It's been some time, but yes, he is definitely a legend in the community. Let me share with you. Kevin has asked me to give a quick overview of what is the Sector Coordinating Council. Let me just take about 10, no more than 15 minutes to give you an overview of what this is. To start with, healthcare is critical infrastructure. Maybe it's not a surprise to you, but we are designated as such by the government, along with 16 other critical industries. Think of telecommunications and financial services and electricity and oil and gas, water, transportation. We are part of the nation's circulatory system the nation depends upon. And it isn't just the Patriot Act that establishes this concept of critical infrastructure. It goes back even to 1998 with the first presidential executive order that identified these critical industry sectors, and noting that all of us face any number of threats, systemic threats, natural threats like pandemics, flooding from hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, wildfires, or man-made threats, terrorism, active shooter, or cyber attack. And because these critical sectors are primarily owned and operated by the private sector, by private industry, this statement of policy goes, it is up to us as industry to organize ourselves around identifying and mitigating these threats, and to do it among ourselves, but also to do it with the government. And hence, that's the point of these executive orders. It has been updated a number of times through successive administrations, but it basically sets up this public-private partnership, which recognizes that, when we're talking about critical infrastructure protection, yes, we are regulated in healthcare. Telecommunications is regulated. Electricity, a lot of these sectors have some level of regulation, but that alone is not going to be resilient and evolving enough to keep up with the threats, nor are market forces alone enough to address these challenges. If we in industry just say, don't tread on me, we got this handled. No, we don't. And so we need to be working together between industry and government. And that's what the point of this is. So there is a sector coordinating council for every critical industry sector. We are the strategic and policy oriented, long-term thinking about how do we change our way of business to be less vulnerable to various attacks. The information sharing and analysis centers are the tactical and operational arm of critical infrastructure. There's an ISAC for every critical sector as well. But when we think about the healthcare system, we need to be representing this broader ecosystem, from direct patient care to the medical device manufacturers that Kevin is particularly interested in, and all of these. So we need to be representing the ecosystem, the interconnected ecosystem within healthcare, because it is interdependent as well. And so hence we have the sector coordinating council structure. And every sector coordinating council is organized a little bit differently based on the uniqueness of a given sector. But we have an overarching health sector coordinating council that's concerned about a number of things, like I said, like active shooter or pandemic planning or supply chain resiliency. That is how they are organized into these specific working groups. And we do this as a special privileged relationship with the government. We are expected, and the government is expected, to meet with industry on an ongoing, regular basis to try to do the mission, which is identify and mitigate systemic threats. So when I mention these executive orders, it's not a mandate or a requirement on industry. Industry is organizing ourselves this way because it's the right thing to do. We are the stakeholders. It is our responsibility. The mandate is actually from the White House to the federal agencies that says you have to go work with those industries. So Department of Energy, go work with electricity. Department of Treasury, go work with the financial services. Health and Human Services, FDA, you got to work with the healthcare industry through all of the range of vulnerabilities and threats. And so I am the executive director of the Cybersecurity Working Group of the Sector Council, which is the largest standing, most active working group. As you can see here, this is out of date, I think it's about 411 members. We seem to gain a new member every week, composed of all of the representatives of all of those subsectors, including their industry trade associations, and then about 15% of which of the members are advisor companies, law firms, consulting firms, security companies. They want to help, they have expertise, but they're not specifically healthcare companies. So in this structure, we have an industry, it is an industry-driven, industry-organized sector council, but we get together with the government as a joint cybersecurity working group. And then down here, you notice we have co-chairs from the government side, so that we constantly are in contact, maintaining communications, syncing up. We do this every other Friday with our government counterparts, to make sure there's no surprises, that we sync up, coordinate, plan. But this is just the subsector distribution of the Cyber Working Group's membership. It's roughly similar to what the national profile looks like. And like any industry group, we do have a governance structure. All 400 plus of those organizational members vote for our executive committee, which represents the various subsectors. The executive committee in turn votes for the chair and the vice chair. And then the thrust of our work, the circulatory system, is these active task groups down here, which are focused on some very specific cybersecurity functions, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail in a moment. But all of this is just to show that we have, as an advisory committee to the government, we need to have a transparent structure for how we are organized and who we are representing, because the government needs to know that if we're going to have this privileged relationship, they need to have confidence that we are actually representative of the sector. And as part of that deal, as it were, unlike other trade associations that they lobby and they have subsector representation, we represent all of them. Couple of conditions: we can't lobby the government, we advise, and we cannot charge dues. It's not pay to play. Dues charging is exclusionary. So if you meet the definition of what is a critical healthcare entity, you can and should be a member of the Sector Coordinating Council. And this is our executive committee. We are chaired by Intermountain Health, the CISO, and the vice chair is the CISO for Abbott, and then the rest of these senior executives represent not just their companies, but more importantly, they represent their subsector. And I mentioned our co-chairs from FDA, from the Office of the CIO, and from ASPR, which has overall coordination of the external partnership with industry from within HHS. And so then the question is, well, what do we care about? What are we trying to accomplish? And we have the advantage of, back in 2017, there was a task force that was established by HHS at the direction of the Congress, called the Healthcare Industry Cybersecurity Task Force. And they were told to answer two questions: why is the healthcare industry getting slammed by cyber attack? And what do we do about it? And not surprisingly, after a year of deliberation, starting in 2016 and published in 2017, as that shows, their diagnosis was healthcare cybersecurity is in critical condition for the various reasons that you see there. Okay, so what? So what do we do about it? And they organized their recommendations into a set of 6, broad major imperatives. Number 2 is what I think a lot of this discussion is about, and where Kevin has been focusing a lot, or most of his work, on the security and resilience of medical devices and health IT. But all the rest are given equal weight, given the broad range of the membership and the subsectors and their specific interests. And so cascading under those 6 major imperatives in 2017 were 105 action items. fairly lengthy to-do list, fairly detailed ideas, not just about what industry should do, but what government should do beyond regulation. What should government be doing to assist their sector? What should HHS be doing to assist us in improving the security and resiliency of our infrastructure? So we developed a task group structure around putting flesh on the bones of those action items. A task group structure which simply says we're going to implement one of these recommendations. We're going to typically build out a best practices or a guidance document that that provides the kind of detail that is actionable in an enterprise environment or a clinical environment. And these task groups work together to develop the deliverable and the outcome that they want. And then when we publish, they typically will fold. So this is the group from 2023 that is active, but since 2018, when we reorganized, we've probably stood up and disbanded at least a dozen previous task groups, given that they have completed their work. So on the medical device security, medical technology security, you can see we have actually 4 task groups. Two of them are, one of them is about to be disbanded because they've done their work, and these are at various stages of completion of their work. But the rest of these have, and these don't have applicability just to medical devices. Obviously, the customer set, right? The hospitals who are deploying this, they are part of this. They are integrated with this work. Truly an effort of collaboration, mutual understanding, mutual respect, despite the fact that there remain differences of opinion between MDMs and HDOs about who's responsible, who's accountable for cybersecurity. But we're trying to bridge those differences and make sure we get ground truth about the concerns on both sides, about the restraints, resource restraints, the technical, the business constraints, and trying to find compromise about what mutual expectations ought to be. And so what these task groups do, and by the way, task groups are, what are they? They are typically co-chaired by 2 different organizations, sometimes 3, from different subsectors, because we really do need to have that cross-sector perspective on what is a shared challenge. It's a challenge that may affect each subsector a little bit differently, but it is a shared challenge, and therefore it's a shared responsibility. So we need to have that kind of collaborative structure in place. And then the membership of those task groups are populated by anywhere from 30 to 130 people. And they're the ones doing the work, not me. I set the table, they gotta come to the table, they gotta do the work. They're the stakeholders, they're the practitioners, they know their business, they have to do this. So if we can get the best thinking, the best of what they do on the table, and then we can sort of bring consensus around what really is best practice, good practice, and then let's put that out to the rest of the community as a resource, as a free resource, as by the sector for the sector. That's a very important principle. So the output of all of this are these publications. Since 2019 was our first one. We reorganized in 2018 after I came on in 17 and put this structure into place. But all of these are freely available at healthsectorcouncil.org. It's as you can see, it's been a very, very busy first quarter of 2023. 5 publications, more to come. And several of these. This one, Health Industry Cyber Practices, is an update from the 2019 version called Hiccup. It is Hiccup. What should mostly hospitals, health providers be doing? What are the top 10 practices in cybersecurity that they should be doing? What about clinicians, nurses, doctors, surgeons, medical students? They need to know that they actually have some responsibility in cybersecurity as well. We have a video training series that's taught by an ER doc and a hacker. He's both. He can hack the human, he can hack the device. This latest one and this one here, March 2023, are both joint publications, primarily developed by the industry stakeholders, but put through an HHS, approval and clearance process so that it becomes a joint publication, thereby giving it more more visibility, and we've gotten a lot of visibility from that. So that's a very important part of this, that we have that joint effort between industry and government to come up with what are best practices beyond, once again, beyond regulation. And more to come, more to come. And, this is just, we have all those deliverables that I just showed you, those publications in the middle column, answer the mail from these top 6 imperatives that the healthcare industry task force prescribed to us. And then finally, our biggest priority for the year ahead is a 5-year strategic plan. Okay, the task force report was in 2017. We've answered the mail on a lot of those. Doesn't mean we haven't yet measured how well we are improving based on publications that we have delivered to the industry. But we can only do what we can do as a council. We don't have authority. We're not regulators. But we've addressed those. We've given the tools. We've given the toolkits to the industry. But now we know that since 2017, the healthcare industry has changed a lot. We have more home health, telemedicine, wearables, implantables. There's massive consolidation going across in the health provider industry. Healthcare is changing yet more over the next 5 years. And are we prepared for that? What are the cybersecurity challenges that are implicated by this evolving healthcare industry? Right? Amazon is a healthcare company now, right? They get health delivered to your door overnight. It's a much different business model that is evolving. And so we have to be prepared for that from a cybersecurity perspective. And that's what we're doing now is sort of mobilizing with the help of Deloitte, which has a deep bench in cybersecurity and healthcare. And they are facilitating a series of workshops for us to bring the best thinking together of our senior executives across the industry to do that prognostication and thinking about how do we devote more resources smartly to these cybersecurity challenges. So by this time next year, we will have a strategic plan, a roadmap, if you will, about what does healthcare cybersecurity look like in 2029. In 2017, healthcare cybersecurity, by the task force's estimation, was in critical condition. So can we get healthcare cybersecurity to stable condition in 2029? Well, what does that mean? What does that look like? How do we measure it? That's what we're going to be working on over the next year. So I will stop there, and we can have a conversation to maybe dig a little bit deeper into some of the questions, some of the issues I've raised.
Thanks for that overview, Greg. Already got a question about just a really basic one. You've apparently excited the audience enough. One question is, well, how does one join and volunteer and contribute? What are some of the best ways for I don't know if it's an individual or an organization, what entity or what can join HSCC? Yeah.
So our charter, first of all, from the top down, the Department of Homeland Security oversees this entire public-private partnership. It's under a national critical infrastructure protection plan. So DHS is there to coordinate every critical industry sector and their partnerships with the government, their partnerships with the industry. And they have a general, the first slide I showed you was a definition of what's a critical infrastructure entity. Basically, it's something that you are responsible for delivering critical assets and services to the public, and you are responsible for restoring them if they have been significantly or catastrophically disrupted by some external event. Okay, well, what does that mean for healthcare? Basically, we said, what is a critical healthcare entity? Let's take it down to the regulated level. You are either a covered entity or a business associate under HIPAA. Basically, you're a health provider. You are regulated by FDA as a pharma or med tech company. You are part of the payment reimbursement system under CMS. That's a plan or a payer like a Kaiser or an Aetna. You are responsible for health information interoperability, data interoperability, which is regulated by the Office of the National Coordinator within HHS, or you're an industry group representing any of the above. Okay, so that is what qualifies your organization as a voting member of the Sector Coordinating Council. Now, I mentioned in the beginning about the membership that we also have a category. We cap it at 15% because of the advisor category. Think of consulting firms that are totally focused on healthcare, or law firms that are very focused on security and privacy law, or security companies. They want to help. Okay, you can help. You can help pro bono, provided you don't use the Sector Coordinating Council as a platform for business development. This is not a trade show. No sales pitches. This is about the greater good. It's about our responsibility as the industry stewards of critical infrastructure. So becoming involved is nothing more involved than having to listen to me drone on for 30 minutes in an orientation call showing you what I just showed you was that slide deck. Because people say, I hear I want to join this, I should be joining this organization. I don't know what it is. What is this? So I make sure I give them 30 minutes to process what this is. This is a matter of organizational responsibility, frankly. So when we have this orientation call, then if your organization consents, basically at senior management levels, you will have your organization name posted on our website as a matter of transparency. You go to healthsectorcouncil.org, in the About tab, you'll see the organizational membership list. Your organization will go there. And typically, it usually starts with the Chief Information Security Officer for the Cybersecurity Working Group. He says, okay, this is important. I will designate not just myself, but maybe 2 or 3 people on my team who have relevant job descriptions or expertise to support the various work streams that we have in place. We've got 15 task groups in place now, and next year maybe 3 of those are going to go away, and there's going to be 3 new ones. We just stood up 2 new task groups this year, and we're about to stand up a 3rd on operational technology cybersecurity, which will go directly to sort of the manufacturers, the pharma and med tech. So that's really all it takes, and then we enroll you and give you a SharePoint account, put you on our email distribution lists for the full working group and for any of the task groups. And then participation is really up to you and your organization. There aren't strict requirements about how you participate. You should join at least 1 task group, otherwise what's the point? And when you join that task group, you ought to plan on participating in at least half of the meetings, but we don't hold you to it. You can get out of what you put into it. That's basically it. And I think everybody is motivated across all of the subsectors by the very basic principle that we are doing this for the patient. Ultimately, it's about the patient. We're all patients. And so our unifying principle, our slogan, if you will, is cyber safety is patient safety. And everybody sort of puts aside their differences, if there are any, and there are not many, but when it's about the patient, that's why we're in this business.
All right. Well, thanks for that clarification. So there's so many documents that HSCC has produced through the participation of its members. I wanted to go through some of the more, should we talk about the classics, vinyl. The one that strikes me that belongs on vinyl and will last a while and already has a version 2 is the JSP, or the Joint Security Plan. And I know I hear a lot from manufacturers, especially with the omnibus bill, who are just sort of getting introduced to the whole idea of what is medical device security. Hey, how do I start to stand up a program? What can you tell us about the JSP high level? And then just also, how is it evolving now that that document's been updated? And what would people use the JSP for?
Great question. Back in 2016, early 2017, I guess. I think, Becton Dickinson, the medical device company, and Mayo Clinic got to talking and thought, we have not done a good job in medical device community in terms of building security into our medical devices. Part of it is we got caught flat-footed when it's in the early part of the 2010s. More and more devices started getting connected into networks, hospital networks over the internet, and that expanded the attack surface, and the vulnerabilities in those medical devices didn't have security built in, and this sort of left hospitals kind of holding the bag, so to speak, in terms of how do we do compensating controls of medical devices that are not inherently secure. Meanwhile, the device manufacturers go back to the hospital and say, well, yeah, our devices are not secure. We're working on that. But hospitals, quit using password as your password. Quit sharing passwords. How about some basic hygiene on your end? You wash your hands before you go in the operating room. Wash your infrastructure before you plug everything in. So, circular finger pointing going on. So they decided, first what we need to do is what became the Medical Device and Health IT Joint Security Plan, or JSP, was let's take the best of some of the more forward-leaning medical device companies, whether it's BD or GE or name your company, and let's put our best practices on the table, and let's figure out what's the best way to design, develop, manufacture, test cybersecurity into medical devices from the ground up. Knowing that there are so many devices in the past, they're 15, 20 years old, big iron MRI machines. You can't just replace it. You can't go down to Home Depot and buy a new one. So the product development life cycle in some of these medical device areas are very long. So you have some long-term planning. So let's get started now. We've got to get cybersecurity built in, because it is an existential truth that we're not going to get any more secure unless we're building it in. So BD started that with a bunch of other medical device companies. Mayo Clinic and Cleveland, Kaiser, others got involved to help set expectations and to explain, what it is that they are getting right out of the box. It's not enough. So that is what the JSP was. That was one of the first flagship or vinyl classics that we produced within weeks of the other classic, vinyl classic, which is HICCUP, the Health Industry Cybersecurity Practices of 2019. So the counterpart to the JSP is guys, HDOs, here are the top 5 threats, basic things like email and data loss and ransomware. And here are the top 10 cybersecurity practices you need to deploy to better secure your clinical environment from cyber threats and vulnerabilities. So the 2 of those were released right after each other, and it really sort of set the signal to the industry that, okay, we're mobilized, we're working this. Now on the JSP, it touched on a number of things that we realized we needed to spend a little bit more time doing a deep dive on. So subsequent to its publication in 2019, a couple of other task groups were established to, again, put meat on the bones of some basic notions established in the JSP, like you can do better in terms of customer-supplier relationships if you get the contract right at the beginning. So there's a lot of misunderstandings stem from unanticipated issues down the road once you buy this product or once you sell this product. So we started in on a model contract. So that was one of our publications that basically looked at if we could get the biggest stakeholders at the table together, and by biggest I mean it's Mayo and Kaiser and Cleveland, Freighter, HCA and others, and some of the biggest medical device companies. And basically they spent 2 years pre-negotiating a contract, recognizing that if we can get 80 to 85% of the most commonly used cybersecurity terms and conditions in a model contract, we're doing well. Leave the other 15% for that for those unique circumstances in a procurement. And so that's what we did. We went through, like, I think 34 clauses that would constitute what each side expects of the other. And it was a negotiation, but in that negotiation, there was a lot of listening, a lot of myth busting, such that we could actually, when you listen and you actually want to succeed, we want to find compromise, consensus, then you compromise. A great model. The other one that we did a deep dive on, another task group. So the model contract was published in, where are we? We're 23. I think it was published in 21, late 21. Another one was the Legacy Medical Device Task Group, just published last month, early March. And it's called HICMALTS, Health Industry Cybersecurity, Managing Legacy Technology Security. We like acronyms, stupid acronyms, they're memorable. This again was another, it was another negotiation about, as a medical device ages in the clinical environment, and patching is harder to do. And, oh, you're running Microsoft Vista? Okay, that's not supported anymore. So how do you deal with those compensating controls? At what point does the medical device manufacturer no longer have responsibility or dwindling responsibility and accountability for the security, sending patches over to a 10-year-old machine or fleet of machines? At what point does risk transfer to the HDO, and what compensating controls are they going to have to make? I can't afford another $10 million, medical device fleet purchase. So crap, I got to, for the next 3 years, I'm going to have to, keep these devices running with, duct tape and baling wire. All right. But those are risk decisions that the HDO has to make, while the MDM is trying to balance its various engineering and financial pressures.
So Greg, going back to the model contract language, in my mind, I'm trying to think of it as like a pseudo master agreement. And you have these large healthcare delivery organizations who were heavily involved with getting that negotiated. What message do you have to the small healthcare delivery organizations? It might be the community hospital or a small clinic. How might they be able to use some of this model contract language, and what should they expect? And what would they even say to a vendor if they want to engage on that? Would they just say, "Oh yeah, we want the HSCC bullets," or what would they do?
That's a great question, and I think a lot of this is going to be a culture shift over time. For the small for the small hospital systems, many of them are relying on group purchasing organizations. So I would say, number one, and by the way, the model contract was co-led by Premier. So Premier Inc. is one of the largest, I don't know where they stand in the rankings, but one of the largest group purchasing organizations. So they use their clout as the middleman, particularly in contract negotiations, to represent their clients, their customers, who are the HDOs, to do that sort of middleman negotiation. I'm not real up to speed on how those negotiations take place, but clearly, if it were just a very large manufacturer as a provider to a very small hospital, there's going to be a power imbalance there. The small hospital system is not going to have buyer's clout over the large manufacturer. So you have to rely on either GPOs, or it's a matter of over time. They're not going to say, will they say, I want to use the HSCC model contract? Well, I think they need to know what's in it. Just start with some of the basic questions to ask. I think Mayo Clinic has its list of 77 or something like that. They got a very involved list of questions that they hand over to the device manufacturers as it relates to security. Small hospitals can do the same thing, again, but they're just not going to have necessarily the purchasing clout, the customer clout that the larger hospital systems do. So we are hoping that over time, if it works for the big guys, then it ought to be scalable to the smalls as well. So I think it's just a matter, again, I think it's a culture shift over time. It's an awareness over time that here are the basic things you need to be expecting as a customer. And from the MDM side, this, as negotiated by some of the biggest MDMs, this is saying, this is what we, the MDMs, should be responsible for, right? This is the right thing to do. We can no longer, cut corners financially on this. This is existential. This is patient safety, and FDA will get increasingly aggressive in its, or Congress will give FDA increasing regulatory authority if we don't just do this ourselves.
So speaking of FDA, maybe you could help the audience understand. We have one question related to publications. What is the so FDA publishes guidance, right? It's non-binding guidance. So it's not a requirement, but there's strong recommendations. And typically, if you follow these recommendations, you'll have smoother sailing. How do the HSCC? How should one characterize the HSCC documents? They're not, regulatory requirements. How would you compare and contrast that with, something that comes out of, say, the FDA on medical device security?
Yeah, well, the Patch Act amendments, or the Appropriations Act from last year, actually does give. It's not
right,
guidance anymore. It is required. You have to build security in, and it's now they're looking at it as a quality measure.
I guess I should add in not just FDA, but also the congressional statute. So there's congressional statute, and then there's FDA documents, and then there's HSCC.
That's right. So I told you about the HICMOS, the Managing Legacy Technology Security. So one of the senior staff at FDA was one of the co-leaders of that, not in a regulatory stance, just simply helping the industry people craft that balance of managing legacy technology in a way that is aligned with FDA's guidance, so that there's no inconsistencies between what FDA is recommending or requiring of the industry and what the HSCC, as an industry-driven organization, is recommending to ourselves. So, there are points of tension in some of the companies, in some of the medical device companies. Here is a basic truth, and that is all of the cybersecurity people who work with the HSCC, the cybersecurity people within the medical device manufacturers, they know they have a problem that they need to step forward as a company, but they have to convince the business side, to their CFO and the engineers and the marketing, the product development, that guys, we've got to invest in this. So there's also difficulties within an organization, different equities at stake. So that has to be balanced within an internal organization, because you will have resistance because of cost. But eventually, we hope that with more pressure from FDA, more pressure from the Congress, more MDMs are going to step up. Many, as I mentioned, are leaning forward. But by the same token, the White House has been particularly insistent on HHS that they've got to do something to stop ransomware attacks on hospital systems, because we know that hospital systems, most of the ransomware attacks that are happening in healthcare delivery organizations are not because of insecure medical devices. It's because of basic blocking and tackling cybersecurity hygiene in the clinical environment. And that is, HIPAA is not enough, right? HIPAA is not a security rule. So HHS, you may see over the coming weeks or months, maybe putting forward some minimum mandatory controls on hospital systems. Like stop blaming the medical devices, guys. You got your own problems to deal with. So that's an important point we have to recognize.
What are your what have you been hearing on the more legislative front? That's executive branch. Last year Congress stepped in on the medical device pre-market. There's discussion about now looking at the HDO side, or what you call cyber hygiene. What you see bubbling up might be in the this Congress in the coming year or so.
Well, I was invited to testify at the Senate Homeland Security Committee last month, March 16th, I think. You can have a look at that. Everyone can just Google Senate Homeland Security Government Affairs Committee, and it was March 16th hearing. They asked the same question: what should we do? What can we do to be helpful? They've done some stuff already, surprisingly. I mean, I've worked in Congress. I've lobbied Congress in the past. And they were asking, beyond regulation, what can be done, particularly for the small to mid-sized hospitals that don't have the resources, the expertise. Well, let's give them incentives. Let's give them subsidies. Let's give them grants. Let's give them technical assistance to help them, meet their regulatory requirements on HIPAA. But if HHS were to impose other mandatory minimum controls on hospital systems, well, okay, show me the money. I'm a small hospital. You tell me to comply with the cyber regulation. Okay, tell me which nurse I'm not going to hire because I can't afford the compliance costs. Tell me which medical devices I'm not going to be able to buy and take care of my patients because I had to be taking care of cybersecurity. So there is that very fundamental existential financial question that has to be answered. And so, we are, in my testimony, I offer quite a number of different ideas for how government can use incentives to investment incentives for small hospitals. For example, in 2021, Congress passed a bill signed into law, and it amended the HIPAA Act to direct the Office for Civil Rights, which enforces HIPAA, to say, look, if this hospital has gotten breached, a data breach, and they can show that over the past year, they have been implementing the NIST cybersecurity framework, they have been implementing the HICCUP, which is what the Sector Coordinating Council produced about good cybersecurity hygiene. If they've done all the right stuff and they still got hacked and they lost a lot of data, try not to punish the victim. Take that into account, OCR, and moderate your, the fines, the penalties, moderate the length and depth of your audit, and let's give them more help. So that's a signal to the healthcare industry. If you implement NIST and HICCUP, maybe OCR will just take it a little bit more easy on you. You got to do the right thing. So that's an incentive. So there's more things like that, and we've talked about CMS. Power isn't the money. Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services, they pay hospitals, and they reimburse them based on a whole range of factors. Why not throw cybersecurity in there? I mean, it's kind of piling on, and it's a lot for hospitals to take on. But you say, look, if you can show that you're implementing NIST or HICCUP, you're doing the right thing with cyber, that's good for patient safety and quality, maybe we'll give you an additional 10 cents on the dollar for your reimbursements, right? So use CMS reimbursement as a carrot to drive investment in cybersecurity.
Yep. Well, let's see. I think we have time for one more question, and I see we have one here on workforce development from HHS, actually. The question is asking, is HSCC looking into monitoring workforce development and incentivizing education in this area? And then maybe this is more for people in your sphere, but the sub question is, do current cybersecurity curricula at universities sufficiently prepare the experts? Do we need to teach people how to hack? So a lot of questions in there, a lot of things you could nibble there.
20 years after I was the principal staff author of a bill that was enacted into law, the Cybersecurity Research and Development Act of 2002, that still is a problem. We wrote that bill when I was with the House Science Committee because there has never been really even as sexy as cybersecurity is now and how many people are going into it, there still aren't enough cybersecurity professionals going into the workforce. We wrote that bill to push money into NIST and the National Science Foundation to in turn push money to colleges and universities to establish cybersecurity, computer science, STEM programs that lead to a career in cybersecurity to build a pipeline. But it hasn't, we're still in deficit. We're still in cybersecurity deficit, and now it's a matter of, the richer industries poaching from others. So the financial services guys, where I came from before, they got a lot of money, so they pay a lot of money to people. You could have a really top-notch cybersecurity CISO in a hospital system, and maybe a financial services company says, "Yeah, come work with us. We'll add 50% to your income." So there's that constant poaching going on. But one of the things I mentioned earlier in my slide deck is, but we also know that it's not just cybersecurity professionals; it's the day-to-day users. And so that was the point of the cybersecurity for clinician. Go to YouTube and go to YouTube and just search for cybersecurity for the clinician. We just published this last month, or earlier this month. It is a series of 8 videos, 6 to 7 minutes each, good for one CME, one continuing medical education or continuing 1-hour credit. And it's just, you're a doctor, you're a nurse, you're a medical student, nursing student. You need to know about cybersecurity. I know your job is to take care of patients, but you're touching data, you're touching technology, and you're touching patients. And that's a risk when you have this looming cyber threat. So what are the basics that you need to do? So have a look at those videos, because the cyber workforce is not just cyber professionals; it is the users in the workforce. So we're trying to bring that point home with this set of videos. And the on-camera talent, as I mentioned, is an emergency room doctor from UC San Diego, and he's a self-taught hacker. So he knows what he's talking about in both instances, and he sees it. He sees it happening.
Yeah. Well, let's see. We've got just a few more minutes left. So as we're starting to get toward the closing of this chat, of course, next week you're going to be hosting the all hands HSCC, the once a year all hands out in Minneapolis. I'm curious if you could tell us, and obviously not everybody on the call is going to be going to that event. What are you hoping to get out of that event, and what are some of the outcomes you're hoping to move toward
Sure.
from next week's all hands?
Yep. So the all hands takes place twice a year, April and November.
Twice a year. Yeah.
It's a membership only meeting. So it's internal under the auspices of the Department of Homeland Security, as I mentioned, because we have this privileged relationship to work with government. So it's closed to the public, closed to the press. It is a working session. So that happens. In addition, you saw the list of task groups. Those are 15 task groups. Collectively, they have well over 300 Zoom calls per year among all of those task groups. Zoom calls, real-time screen share editing, doing the work. We get together twice a year. It's not huge, 120 people in person, maybe another 100 people online, virtual. And we work through our work plan. Here's report outs from the task groups. What's our progress? What do we need from the general membership? We hear from senior executives in industry. We hear from senior executives in government. At our November all hands here in Washington, D.C., we had the Deputy Secretary of HHS, Andrea Palm, come to speak to us. So we're trying to just sort of get a mind meld on some things. But this particular strategic plan, it's a day and a half. It's like 12 hours total of meeting time, 8 hours day one, 4 hours on day two. A significant 8 hours of that meeting will be focused on workshopping our strategic plan, our 5-year strategic plan. We're going to be looking at some basic questions that I sort of raised with you earlier. How is the healthcare industry changing? If you look at healthcare through a prism of categories, how's it changing in technology? How is it changing in clinical operations? How is it changing in business operations? Consolidation and all that, or business models. And finally, how is it changing in policy and regulation? What's the government, what's Congress trying to do? How are they trying to fix things? So if you look at how healthcare is changing in those 4 categories, then you say, well, then what are the cybersecurity implications for each one of those changes? How do we have to factor that in as chief information security officers or people down their chain of command, senior executives? We have to plan for the future. Every organization has to plan, 2, 3, 4 years out in their budgeting cycle. You want how much? Why? Yeah, I need $50 million, boss. Why? and you got to explain why. And that's what this strategic planning is about. But it's sector wide, not just by single enterprise. So we'll be looking at what are those cybersecurity challenges we need to prepare for, and how can we say at the end of a 5-year planning period that we will have reached our goals. So that is a significant amount of the time will be spent at the all hands meeting next week in Minneapolis going over that. We'll have more working sessions like that in the summertime, into the fall, when that process ends and we get down to writing the strategic plan. So sometime this time next year we'll have that strategic plan. So this is really a continuation of what we've started about 6 months ago. That's really what we're getting out of it. And there's a lot of administrative stuff. God, the website's getting a little bit long in the tooth. Can't we make it a little bit more exciting and interactive? So yeah, okay, let's talk about that.
Oh, you're going all TikTok. That's what I hear, right?
I gotta bust a move on TikTok and see if I can get more viewerships. We're doing okay. We're getting a lot of uptake. So maybe I don't have to go to that extreme, but yeah. The more we can use social media and all the modern tools of the trade to raise awareness, because we really do need to get to, we have 400 plus organizations, and there are tens of thousands of healthcare organizations across the country. We don't necessarily need to have all of them in our ranks. We just need to be sure we are representing their interests as broadly as possible.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're at the top of the hour. So this comes to the conclusion of our monthly seminar series. I really appreciate you coming out here. Greg Garcia, Executive Director of the Healthcare, HSCC rather. It's been terrific to have you on the program. For our audience, I want to say next month is our final seminar of the academic year, and that'll be Bo Woods on the third Thursday of May. And then we'll resume after May. We'll take the summer break and return in September. But Greg, thank you so much for what you're doing at HSCC. Looking forward to seeing you next week. All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Good to be with you. Thanks, Kevin. Bye-bye.
Bye.